focus on the things that actually matter and use the system that can get you to that end goal.
People intending to have relationships, but really having a transaction model.
Not because they're unlucky, but because they're creating the situation that puts them there.
Don't be the first person to talk. Let them process it.
At some point in the conversation, don't talk about insurance. Like, get off, talk about other stuff.
Oh, yeah. One of the most frustrating things about me along the way is,
I mean, how was the first year that you opened your agency?
you just get smarter as you fail, if you will. There's no really failure, but as you try and learn, it comes along. You might be able to actually close somebody that I can't.
Boom!
Boom! Chad Spaide. How you doing, man?
Hey, I'm doing great. How about you guys?
Good.
Yeah.
Now it is Spaide, not Spaide. Like,
I know.
Greg thought.
Jason thought it was Spaide.
It's however it comes out. I'm sure
How would Borat say it?
Yeah.
Spaide.
Yeah.
There you go.
Pretty good. That's
Horrible.
not bad. Well, if you've listened to the podcast before, then you know what question we're going to ask you.
Mm-hmm.
What is the first concert that you went to?
Oh, man. Rolling
Reach back.
All the way back.
It was, well, bands that I can't remember when I was younger, but none of them are famous, right? It would have to be Rolling Stones.
Ooh.
Nice. That is great.
So not New Kids on the Block.
No, I missed that one.
Yeah.
Not the Wiggles.
The Wiggles.
I'm from a
the
small
Wiggles-
town in Ohio, so those just don't come around. So we had to get our driver's license and drive to
Yeah.
Deep. So
Oh, to Motor City.
yeah, exactly.
Nice.
Well, awesome. Well, for folks who may not know who you are, Chad, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us how you got into insurance and why you're still doing it. Because why?
Because why?
Why? What did we do? All right. It was funny because I kind of looked up to my friend's parents when I was growing up. And so I just decided when I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do in high school, I'm like, what do you guys do? It seems like, you have nice things and it's easy when you come from a small town to get a misrepresentation of what wealth is. Well, what he did is he would buy like seven years of Skier magazine and for the price of 1 year and he'd resell it. But how he described it to me was, it's kind of like a State Farm agency. And I was like, oh, okay, well, I can't do that. So I already name dropped there, sorry. But I went to another captive when I was in college and just kind of worked for an agent and hunted down the district manager, not knowing what that was. And I'm like, I just want to start getting experience. So I got a job cold calling for an older agent and basically left me alone. And
Nice.
I never did this before, but I love the phone. So it wasn't a big deal.
Well, so
But-
you liked cold calling?
Yeah.
Huh. Yeah. I had no problem with it back in the olden days.
Yeah,
It's
I mean,
interesting though. It's hard to find.
I
somebody that
wasn't
wants
good at the time, but it didn't bother me. So, it started off that way, but I think I was just too young at the time. I just didn't get it. You're watching movies with your friends and they talk about a life insurance salesman and you're like, oh, man, am I that easy? So,
Yeah.
So I left, and I went into another business for about 5 years where I learned my sales skills and burnout and then went back into it. But I learned back then that I knew I had to go the independent route for my personality. And so I learned enough about it back then to know exactly how to get into it and what I needed to do. And from there, I think that was back in like 2001. So from there, the time just warps in this business. So it's like I feel like I'm still starting. In a lot of ways you are, because you're always evolving. You just get smarter as you fail, if you will. There's no really failure, but as you try and learn, it comes along. And then one day you realize, well, it's kind of here, but now I know how to start it.
Yeah. So that time doing the cold calling must have given you a ton of insight on how to run your agency when you eventually went back, right?
Yeah.
Or not?
Well, I really didn't handle too much with the operations back then, but I always knew the phone was, even back really when I was a kid and I used to race BMX, I would just call the companies and say sponsoring. So I never had a problem with the phone, but I'd say I think I always had my ears open. So yeah, it definitely helped me get going by putting in those couple of years or whatever it was. The sales skills I ended up learning later on the phone. And most of it is recognizing the truth in the conversation, right? Is this a real lead or not? does it have potential? And what are the things that you need to say to actually get their attention and have them realize that you can, you have their best interest in mind, that you want to actually help them. That came later on. And I think my first pass at it, I was kind of selling myself smoke first, right?
Yeah.
And that I learned later on. And that was I think that was the difference that made the difference, really.
And where'd you go after that?
I actually went in and trained and became a commodity broker for about 5 years, dealing with grains and like meats and metals and stuff like that.
In Chicago?
Oh, crazy.
But no, out here, actually, it was the crazy thing. I'm sorry, out here in California. But from there is where it was a really cool group of people. I think we went really big. I started when we were like 3 people in my division, and it went to like 50 in 5 years.
Oh, wow.
But you just burn out after a while. But I mean, there you learn the phone, and you learned it very well. And we had a respect. We were very competitive, but also had a respect for each other, where you could tell somebody, don't say that, and you're not going to get pissed off, because everybody has best interest in mind, right? And after that happens for a while, then you start to realize and start to develop your craft. The worst and best learning lesson is when somebody can call somebody after you lost it and close it.
Yeah.
Really, that's never going to happen again. But anyway, so, we helped each other out, and it was very much a natural persuasion of what you guys are dealing with and some of the stuff that you do. As long as you know the maps and models and the structure of it, it gets pretty easy as long as you enter it with intention in the right state.
Yep. I always like that. Like I'd say once a month, maybe a little bit more than that, but like every once in a while, another agency will close an internet lead that we got. And I was like, see, and I love it when they close it, because it's like, see, you should have just closed it right away. Like,
oh yeah. Well, it's like that way. And it's the weirdest thing, because even we might have the same map, the same sales map, you and I, but there's also something underneath it. You might be able to actually close somebody that I can't, and vice versa. And it's the strangest thing. And sometimes that's the best thing to do, is switch it up. I'm not a big fan of rotating like lead owners, right? But sometimes it works that way. It's the strangest thing. And one of the things we used to do too to make it learn is, once kind of the pressure's off, is call them back in a half hour, just out of curiosity. I know you're not going to go with me, but to help me, just out of curiosity, if you were, why would that be?
Nice.
Right. Now you've reopened future opportunity, but also they're not under pressure, right? You don't have your thumb on them. So a lot of times they'll tell you the honest truth. Well, it was my brother-in-law, he's my agent, broker, whatever. Right. And so, you try to get that up front and uncover it, but sometimes they'll tell you the real truth after, where you can learn from. I just thought you were not, or I thought you were, or something like that. So as long as you can be open to receiving that type of information and using it and playing with it, then you can grow from it.
Yeah, that makes sense. What have been like throughout the years? How was the first year that you opened your agency? How was that for you?
Well, it turns out an empty filing cabinet is really empty. So it's like a roller coaster when you first start it. When you win a client, and that it feels great, and you're like, oh, it's so easy. And then sometimes the cold comes a little bit, but and there's a lot of learning, that you're going on. It's like you're full of ambition in the beginning, but you really don't know anything. And then as you start to learn the policies, and I'm an independent, you start to focus on building your portfolio of carriers that you're going to do business with. That takes up a lot of time. And then you got systems, you got accounting, you got all this stuff. So eventually you get pulled away from it. But in the beginning, it was, I started back when, it was just the white pages, I loved it. We would just go and, if I needed to grab something, I would get them on the phone and convince them and drive to their house and go through the apps and come back home and bind it.
Nice.
And it's all doable. But then, things came in where do not call list, people got rid of their home phones, and then we just just got away from it. But back when we would just hire in the early days when I was in college, just as an associate agent, we would just have girls come over from high school right after school and jump on the phone, and they would get 3 to 5, in a couple hours, they get 3 to 5 package leads. I'm talking like everything. And, for a while we couldn't keep up with it. And then, we just didn't want to run it at night and had referrals coming in and so forth. So let it go kind of and then I was thinking about getting it going again. This was a little while ago, but then it's like, how do you get the cell phone numbers? But you know what? Times have changed. Anybody that's closed on a loan in the past 10 years has used an email and a cell phone, probably. So, yeah, right. So anyway, that's what we did. That was the only way you get out and get marketing. And it turns out like this thing, it not only brings, people can reach you, you can reach people with it.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, it goes both ways.
Jason and I talk about that all the time because and we talked about it actually on the coffee talk that dropped today, is the importance of putting the right people in the right roles. And it's so easy to, especially for us that have been, where I was at Merrill Lynch on the phone, pounding it all day. And you were at the commodities thing. Jason was at the bar and, but we're on the phone, all joking aside, we're on the phone and we are pounding it. So in our mind, that sort of is the kind of like coming up, that's your pledgeship. That's how you get seasoned. And it's a different generation, right? Like, and also with the barriers to entry to this business where they have to get licensed, they have to do all this stuff. There's a higher value on that asset, right? That human capital. To put them on the phone making 500 dials when you can pay somebody a much less to do that, it seems like it makes sense to, organize it in that way. Where you had the high school gals. That's awesome, right? Because they probably didn't cost as much. And of course, minimum wage was less back then. But
it was definitely a lead generator. I think, I think you're going to work ethic there. And that regardless if you're doing the primary dialing, because commercials a slam dunk, you can get a hold of them. Most people have a problem with the follow through, but I think when you look at that work ethic, if you were at Merrill, we would come in at 5 a.m, and you had the advantage of time zones. Sometimes insurance, you can't do that, but we would have lunch brought in. It was next. It wasn't like, I made 3 dials, left a couple messages, right, and I go on break. No, it's like game on all the way till 6:30 p.m. You get up and go to the bathroom and that's about it. You're building. You got to see yourself as a builder and it's go time. And if you can, you work, first of all, I don't think you can build a business in 8 hours a day, but you just, once you catch your momentum, right, and you develop your craft, all you need is somebody on the phone. So, the celebratory walk or break after making a few phone calls is not going to cut it. It just doesn't work that way. You can take 5 years and turn it into 1, or, like sometimes when we're bringing an agent, like, look, you can do this to what you want to make in 10 or 3, what do you want to do?
Yeah, it's just your funnel, right? Are you going to put 200 people into the funnel or are you going to put 500 people into the funnel every day?
Yeah. And it's never the leads,
The leads suck.
That's the common denominator here. I loved it. We had the best leads, that probably ever, you could ever have. And making, 300,000-400,000 a year, and another one making 50 and 60, bitching about the leads. It's the same ones.
Right. No, they're the Glenn Ross lead.
Right. What's the difference?
Jason, none of your team listens to this, right?
Yeah, they do.
Oh, they do? Should I tell them your secret about the leads?
No, I'm sure they know.
If the leads are bad, I'm going to call the lead company. We'll get them all dialed in.
Yeah.
Then all of a sudden the leads are better.
The caveat is I will do that. I will do that because I know that they do stuff on the back end. Now, can I confirm any of those things? No. But if I do that on the back end, tell the lead company, dude, this is sucking. You got to optimize whatever you have to do. Just otherwise we got to pull them. It puts pressure on them. Then I tell my team, hey,
I did it.
I put some pressure on the lead company, and then, these leads should be killer.
It's probably somewhere in the middle. That's how it usually is,
I use it like this. It's just like sales. And this is what I tell our sales agents, do whatever it takes to get you the best result. For me, saying that to the lead company, saying that to the insurance our sales agents will get me the best results.
Right.
So that's what I do.
The other thing that's funny is, when we talk to a lot of agents and depending on where they are, the agent may say, well, it's much tougher in Georgia, or it's much tougher in Washington. It's like, no, I mean, there is a closing percentage. That's your market closing percentage. There's a thing called a bell curve. So that closing percentage is in the middle. You can either be way below it or way above it. I mean, that's the way it works. And, depending on how you hone your craft, if you become a better salesperson, you're going to close a little bit more, and all the little steps. If you make more calls, if you do all of these things, it's going to push you towards the right side of that bell curve. And I could promise you, the people that are saying the leads suck, our market is terrible, and all of these things, they're going to be at the bottom of the bell curve, not because they're unlucky, but because they're creating the situation that puts them there.
Well, it is.
Alienated half our audience.
One big eye opener to me that I really had to develop that is because it wasn't naturally in me by any means. I was just super nice, passive. It's now a good time, and answer the phone. But anyway, there was a guy that would come in. Like, he'd go live like a rock star all month, and then he'd come in 3 days towards the end of the month, right, payday, and do more than I did all month. And I'm like, okay, wait a minute.
That's crazy.
There's another way to this, right? Do I recommend that? No, but it was an eye opener there's a skill set to this, right?
Yeah.
And you have to inoculate it before it comes up, but you also have to be charismatic enough to make that link, right? Rapport. I think Neil said something where it's like lots of time on rapport. And I think rapport has been an abused word, and people are like, oh yeah, I get it. But no, do you have that deep connection? No,
rapport is 45% of the sale. To your point earlier, you said, you may be working something and then Jason works it and then he ends up closing it. I would go out on the limb here and say that if Jason closed it and you didn't, then he had better rapport. 90% of the time, that's going to be what it is. Probably 90%.
Well, it is, and it could just be my tone of voice.
Real statistic.
Maybe they don't, who knows? But I mean, generally speaking, everybody's closable. But the better question is are they the right fit for you, and is it worth the energy it's going to take?
Yes, 100%.
Right.
Yeah, are they your ideal client? Because
do you have that much time? But anyway. Yeah. The ones that I always had the hardest time getting around is the one is like, I see everything's of value and it's better. I'm just not going to out of principle. And it's like, never spend enough time on that one.
Right. Yeah.
I just don't want to.
I love it when someone's difficult and it takes 20 phone calls and all this stuff and then we win them and then it's like, wow, that was tough. Yeah, but it's going to be that tough for everybody else. And most people will not put in that much time. Yeah, so it's like, so it's like when you do win that person over, it's like it's a big win usually.
Yeah, that should be harder to pull away because they're the same person.
And you haven't started working until you get it, the no, right?
Right.
Most people are like, they thought they've been chugging along until they get the no. And then it's over. And it's like, no, that's when it starts. But anyway.
So we were talking,
you go.
We were talking about this in our sales meeting this morning about just trying to read into the conversation. And you said something about that, Chad, too. It's listening, right? You're listening. Neil says it a lot in our stuff, but like you're selling with your ears, right? You're listening to what they're saying to find the clues. That's how to get there. And one of my producers this morning, she said, this guy, I know I have him, but and we're a better deal. I'm giving him more coverages, like the sweetheart, right? We should have it. And every time I talk to him, it's some kind of crisis, right? And I said, well, okay, so there's I said, what is the crisis? And she goes, well, I never ask him. I'm like, well, you need to ask him first of all. But if he's always in a crisis, then likely you're creating another crisis for him by making him make a decision. Like he just doesn't know how to make a decision. So you have to identify what this moment is every time that you call him, and it's a crisis, right? This guy just he's just afraid to make the decision. And oftentimes in most of these sales, that's what it is, right? They're scared to make a decision. So once you uncover what it is, and people are afraid to ask, is there a crisis over there?
Yeah. Somebody wants to show me their baby. I'll be here in a bit. But yeah, it is. I mean, I think we stopped listening a long time ago. We go into something and it's about us, right? And if when you're engaging in a conversation, you're really in a pattern of hypnosis, right? So you go first and then you can meet them there. But if you're bringing all your conditions and wants and needs and desires and you're too busy thinking about that rather than jumping in their model of the world and helping them sort it out.
Right.
If we can't go into the conversation and we're on the outside trying to focus on our motive, we can't make that connection. You know, you're too busy about, oh, do I have the price, or do I have, you know, whatever it is that he wants to hear, or is he going to shut up, or whatever it may be. But if you just let go of all that and just be present and truly listen, I think we'd go a lot further. Sometimes it's very hard to do, especially for certain people. But a lot of times they want to be heard, and nothing's going to happen until they get that out.
Right.
Yep.
And if you let them, in silence it's awkward for everybody. But when they ask a question with somebody like that, just don't be the first person to talk. Let them process it. They're processing. And it's hard because 10 seconds might seem like 4 hours.
Yep.
You know, but that's kind of the way that I've ran. It's like, you know, if they're going through something and they're processing it, let them have that space. And, you know, you might actually just help them resolve something other than their insurance.
Yep. I think that's probably the rookie move. The mistake is like you teach somebody, okay, this is what the opener should sound like. This is what you should do here. This is what the close should sound like. And we have all these scripts and everything. And they're still worried about following the process that they can't be human and listen. And I think that's the pro part of it, is when they can transition, like they got all the steps down. Now they can just kick back and listen. Yeah.
Well, it's like, are we operating like we were with our buddies when we were younger, where you couldn't be the first one to prove your point that you were right? Just waiting. And you always had like some reason of why you knew more or better than them, right? Or you had the right answer, right? And it's just trumping, right? It's like, are we going into our calls like that?
Yep. So funny. But it's true. And I think for us that have a staff, like that's a good point to like really think about. There's a balance between all that. There's a balance between the process and all the stuff that we want. But like, yeah, it's so we always tell our agents at some point in the conversation, don't talk about insurance, like get off, talk about other stuff.
Oh yeah. Well, it's like, it's really not about that. You're selling feelings, and they want trust, and they want to know that you're credible. And from there, it's all about relationships, right? A lot of what I see going on about there is definitely, you know, people intending to have relationships, but really having a transaction model.
Yep.
You know, I think really for us, whether you're captive or not, we need to really focus on that relationship and as an advisory role to build our value.
Yep. So moving from when you started to now, the industry has obviously changed. What are some things that you've implemented in that change that has helped you crush it?
Really, it's business as usual for the most part. I mean, you have leads, you grow business, you try to round them out. One of the most frustrating things about me along the way is once you start building a book, it gets really hard to deliver. I think that the services, or I would just call it a service, that you intended to get into the business for, it gets overwhelming. And you know, once you get a certain amount of clients, you want to keep growing. And, you know, rate increases help you, and, you know, people come and go and stuff like that. But I really got into the business because I like the concept of risk, and I wanted to help people with that. I wanted to do good by that. And we just never had the tools or the margins to be able to do it effectively. And I think over the past, you know, few years or whatever that I discovered automation, I think that is going to be the single biggest thing, because when I got into it kind of by mistake and messed up with it, but I realized that, oh my gosh, I can do what I wanted to do when I got into the business, you know, because it was kind of down at some points, because it's like, I know what I want to be doing. I know what I should be doing, but I can't. I either have to hire too many people to give that type of service, or I don't have the tools to be able to deliver that type of service to our clients. And of course, I got into automation as the selfish side, the prospecting side, right? We all want help there. We want to be the super you and all of that. And then as I started learning more and more about it, I started looking like, oh my gosh, you can use this for servicing. You can use this for annual reviews that I don't know anybody doing, really. And what can I do to reclaim our staff's time? What can I to do to make things easier, to create space so even service can get into the conversation and spend time and focus on nurturing that relationship. And that's been, it just totally revitalized me. And because it's like, oh man, it was a long wait, but now I can start my business the way that I wanted to, And when you first started 5, 10, whatever, you're just focusing on knocking the bills out and cutting even at the end of the month, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because the more, when you start from an empty filing cabinet, the more you grow, the more your expenses do. You're going to need people. You're going to need new PCs. You're going to need this, that, or whatever. And it just doesn't stop for a while. And so I think now this is probably the most exciting time I've had in the business. And I really feel like we're just beginning. And I do feel like a startup again because of what we can do now.
So what can you do? What do you have some specific little tidbits of knowledge nuggets that we can drop?
It's very important to where whatever you do, you keep it as if it were you doing it. And just a lot of email, somebody calls in where they don't have all the information to make a vehicle or driver change or whatever it may be. Instead of typing it out or using templates or hit a button. It's got a form in it. They can do it on their own time. They love it. And it comes back and you can do it. So, I need to get more of those type of emails down, but the ones we have are significant. And out here in California, we have a carrier that has a ridiculous amount of renewal memos for personal lines. And, we used to spread it across 6 CSRs and give the new business memos back to the agents. And now we have one doing it in 10% of the time that it just took her for her portion, going and chasing that stuff down because they want to know everything like re-verifying discounts. You moved, what's your new work address? Because in California, we don't have credit. So those have been a big one. Cancellation sequences, just reminders on the ones that make a mistake. And I would say the biggest impact so far is renewal, reviews, right? Renewal questionnaires way before not way before, but, hey, I just got your renewal. It's going to be this. Or it doesn't have to be a specific number, but looks good or looks bad, and here's what I'm going to do about it. By the way, what are your updates? Click. And we know when they click on it, we know if they complete it, and we know how much time's gone by since they haven't clicked on it. So offering that type of review service, and it's kind of my baby step into the have versus need, like, personal risk management, because most people should have an umbrella, almost everybody. And there's other lines that we have in here. If we're not looking at the whole picture, which, I don't think you're ever going to be happy with what your PIF count is per household, but on the real value, if you're doing it for the right things, if we're offering a review, even if we can't get it, maybe it's health with their employer or whatever it may be. But if we can look at the whole overall picture, we can deliver something unique. And actually, that's where the real pleasure for me comes in. But that's also, I think, where the referrals will come in higher, right? We're still 70% referrals. But just delivering, I'm focusing on, I just want to deliver that real unbelievable experience where they know everything actually is addressed. And, we get property updates back that probably bring their premium down a little, that would bring their premium down a little bit, that we just wouldn't normally have the time to open that can of worms up. And so those have been really impactful for us. But of course, I enjoy the prospecting ones just as much. So you can never see how people are engaging with your marketing. Back in the day, you might mail them a quote or fax, remember the fax, but I know what they're doing in my emails. I know what they're clicking on. I know, where they're looking at it. I know when they're opening up our quotes. We can tell when they're looking at it, so that's amazing. And it's like, you kind of would never know. Did they get it? Did they open it? Right now you can actually know exactly what's going on. But to me, it's exciting because you can bring your pipeline to life even when you're not on the phone trying to get a hold of them.
Are you using Infusionsoft?
I am, yeah.
Yeah, good analytics.
Yeah, well, I mean, just with you're never going to be happy exactly where you're at. There's always things you want. You may not be able to get right now, but it won't take long to get them. But, just the fact of being able to put the hyperlinks and the tagging to send a post to Slack to know when they're engaging in your emails is super killer. So there's a lot to do. It takes a lot to get there, but it's fascinating. And I think it really can go a long way, but you can mess it up too. You really have to do it exactly as if it were you, and you don't want to overdo it, right? It's finding that balance.
I think he's having a mic issue over there. So, oh, look at that. He disappeared.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So as we get up here towards the wrap up, what would you give, like if you had one piece of advice to give out to somebody new that's starting in this business, what would that be?
Don't get caught in all the stuff that's going on out there. It's focus on the cash register. Who cares if somebody has a better something or another, this can do that, or just don't even look at it. Just focus on bringing it in and discover your ways. I don't think it's like somebody that's going to go pay a bunch of company to do videos, right? You don't even know what you want to say, and next month it might not even make sense. So save it, don't get distracted on bringing it in as the start, and nowadays, which wasn't there when I started, we never knew we were going to use contact information like this. Like almost as important as the signature on the application, get everybody's contact information, including the co-insured, right? I think a lot of times we lose accounts because we never built that relationship, but we can now, even if it's a simple birthday card, something basic, but make sure you get the contact information and get it in your system where you can identify what's what, because that's a bummer when you realize that you're going to use all that information. And so those two things, simple, focus on bringing it in and make sure you get accurate contact information, even if you're not going to do it. And, because I'll talk to people all the time. It's like, oh, I don't put it in the management system unless we win their business. And it's like, well, don't you have to put it in there to get it in? But anyway, and it's like, no, it's always a lead. It's not lost. It's not now, so
totally.
So those are it. That's
awesome, dude. It's so funny. I tried to ask you a couple things. I was like, oh, okay. And I didn't realize that my mic was off.
Oh, I can tell you're looking strange. I'm like, oh, what's going on? But,
yeah, I didn't know. And then finally, Craig.
I'm like,
yeah,
just like that.
I like his little. Cool, man. Well, that's awesome advice. And I think that what a difference the world is today than it used to be. But those are really good. These are tools that we have to take advantage of, especially on the indie side, man. You guys got a lot of analytics to use.
Analytics.
And it's too much sometimes, but anyway.
But to your point, focus on the things that actually matter and use the system that can get you to that end goal. I think people like to try to use the system and then adapt it to their end goal. Or maybe they don't even know what the end goal is. Like it's just all these cool features and stuff on this.
Yeah, just keep that client right there in front of your face when you're making every decision.
Yeah.
It is hot in here.
Yeah.
You should see these lights I have everywhere now. I'm already thinking, like, when it's summer and it's already hot in this room, it is going to be 9 million degrees in here.
Yeah, Craig went with the old classic lights instead of the LEDs.
Look at this. Look at that. There's one up there, and there's another one over here.
The studio there, big time.
Yeah, big time. It is big time. Yeah. So, well, cool, man. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Oh yeah,
and how can people find you? Go to the
best way is I have a Facebook group called Pure Potential Insurance Automation, and we discuss a lot of stuff on there, and I show a lot of the stuff, just different things that I'm doing. Try to share it as much as possible.
Cool. I will join.
That's awesome.
Will you let me in?
Yes.
Oh,
I don't know, man.
I wouldn't.
But
yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah.
Cool.
Well, thank you.
Great resource. Thank you.
Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Sure.
And, I wish you guys the best.
Thank you, Chad. You take care, man.
You too, Chad. Thanks. Thank you.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.